Welcome to the Slack Chat podcast. I'm Stuart Winter, the developer and architect of the Slackware ARM port. And hello, Phil.
Hi.
Phil is the developer and maintainer of the SAPI project. God, it's been a long time, hasn't it? We haven't actually spoken for ages, and I've been so busy on things that I've actually forgotten what it is that we were doing.
It's not been that long, I don't think.
Has it not? When was
what
it was October. Okay, it's
it
the first.
has. It has actually. It has. Yeah, we're in December now, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, but well, I've had a very intense last few weeks uh, on a learning expedition.
What have you been up to?
Well, I can't really talk about what I've been up to, not that particular thing anyhow, but it was an urgent project that needed doing. So I've been pretty busy, yeah. I'm just coming out of it and starting to relax. But Phil is the developer and maintainer of the SAPI project, which is, you can see it as an extension to the Slackware ARM port, which allows you to get Slackware ARM up and running easily on Raspberry Pis. So that's what Phil does. It has been a while. It feels like it's basically been about 2 months, and we actually haven't talked at all, I don't think, in that time. So how have you been? What have you been up to?
Slackware-wise, it's just been run-of-the-mill building the installer and kernel and modules packages and making sure that nothing upstream's broken that I have to deal with. It's been relatively easy. There's been no problems. Not much to report on that front, but everything's still working great and no complaints so far.
Oh, good. Well, that kind of brings me to something, because I was thinking as I came out of this big project and I started looking at Slackware again, and I thought, what shall I do now? Because it's kind of in maintenance mode in a way. There's kind of no point in really looking at new hardware of 32-bit because it's not particularly interesting. There's a limit on the amount of RAM it's going to have, how fast it's ever going to be. So I thought, well, okay, so then I looked at the build system. There's about 20 different to-dos and bugs and feature requests. But then there's nothing in that list that sufficiently stirs me to actually really do any of them, because none of them are sufficiently annoying. They're just, that's a really quite a good idea. So I was like, So I thought, what am I going to do with the project? And then I started looking again at what I could do. And I thought, You see, I started looking at the build system and I thought, well, I've already kind of done most of the work to add in AArch64 support. So I did it ages ago, just thinking, well, maybe I'll do it, I don't know, but I'm doing some other work, I'll just put it in at the same time. So I thought, there's quite a lot already done in that regard. So I started making a list of other things that I'd have to do to include AArch64 support.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's not really that much. I looked at the X11 stuff because I thought, oh no, that's going to be a pain, because that build system automatically updates the build numbers, resets the versions and all sorts of stuff. It just takes a heck of a lot of manual effort off of me. But to then have a unified source tree, it means that both AArch64 and ARM are going to compete over build numbers and all sorts of stuff. I was like, so I have to move that logic and put it in the other tool that updates the rest of the system. I was like, I don't know if you've ever looked at some code and you thought, yeah, this is it. Oh. And then you look at how much there is and how complicated it is and how the code is intertwined with other bits, way away. And you're like, oh, how am I going to lift that out without breaking loads of stuff or doing loads of work? And I was like, oh no, that looks terrible. And I sat down and thought a little bit more. And I thought, I know. I'll just make a directory and put all the build numbers and files in a directory. And that way the system can still automatically update all the version numbers, but they're independent. I don't need to build, there's no point in building some X11 package on AArch64 if it only ever needs building on ARM. There's no point in updating it. They can be independent. I went into some other stuff. I looked at the installer and then I turned away. There is a reason why that stuff is not in the source tree. So that needs a bit of work, but it's doable. And then I looked at KDE, and then I looked away again because that's going to be replaced by Plasma pretty soon anyway, so I can do that at the same time. And then I looked at the bootloader, and I thought, I don't really know that much about the bootloader, so that would be a bit of effort. And then I thought, What about the build farm? How's that going to work? And I haven't figured out how I'm going to make this CC work yet with two different compilers, with two different cross compilers on the same x86 hardware. So then I thought, well, actually, why don't I just get a few different AArch64 machines and just do it all natively?
Yeah.
Because they're fast enough anyway. And then and I can keep one cross compiler for ARM for 32-bit. I started thinking it through, Phil, and then you never guess what I did.
The hairs on my arms are standing on end at the minute. You tell me. Tell me everything.
So then I emailed the Pine 64 people and said, can I have a cheeky request? Can you send me a Rock Pro 64? And they said yes. So thanks a lot, Pine 64, for that. And I actually bought some as well with some other bits. So those are en route.
Excellent.
And yeah, so basically I decided to do an AArch64 port, despite having said I wouldn't do one. But that's because I didn't need one. And now I realised that I need one in order to continue to actually do anything with the project that I've run for the last almost 20 years. Yeah. And I've still got lots of things I want to do with it because I enjoy doing it. So I thought, yeah, it's time to do an AArch64 port. And besides, I've got all of the notes that I made when I did the last 3 or 4, however many it actually was in the end. I think it was 4. Yeah. I think this will be the 5th port that I've done. But I already know how to do it, so I can go in and the build system's all set up to do it. I've already got all the tools to just build it. So I thought, yeah, why not? So I thought, shall I call it Slackware ARM64? Are you still there, Phil?
I'm speechless. I'm hanging on every single word that comes out of your mouth. Please continue.
Oh. Thought you got cut off.
No, I'm still here.
So then I thought what to call it. So I thought I could call it Slackware ARM64, but all of the packages, the architecture is going to be called AArch64. That is how you actually pronounce it, by the way. Yeah. So then I thought, well, that would be a bit confusing because what is the difference between ARM64 and AArch64? And it turns out there used to be some difference in the long distant past, but they're synonymous now. The official name for this platform is AArch64 from ARM. So it's going to be called Slackware AArch64. I've got plans. So I looked at the Pinebook Pro laptop and they're currently out of stock in the UK. So I'm not going to buy one of those because I can't. But also I had a look at it. I'm not sure it's entirely supported upstream yet. I might be wrong about that, but I don't think so. What I'm going to do first, I've got these 3 Rock Pro 64 boards on the way, and that will allow me to get going so I can get that done. And then I can look around at other things. So I'd really love to have the port running on a laptop, because I never really I did succeed on the Samsung 32-bit, one of the Exynos, the Chromebooks that I bought, and some Google thing, but never. Well, yeah, it did actually work, to be fair, but I never documented it or anything because it was one of those things you actually had to physically solder something on the board basically to get a generic U-boot on there. So I was just like, oh come on, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to document that either. That's nuts. The hardware guys can do that. So I didn't do that. So it'd be really good if I can get an AArch64 port of Slackware running on a laptop. So that will be the next target, and also some of the desktop machines type, those as well. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing this. It's given me some new interest in where to take it now, and I've got everything set up to do it. So once the hardware arrives, and I get going with it.
Okay.
The plan is to sort of develop it forward. So I'm not planning on releasing any versions of it. So I think I'll just have it as a rolling release for current, unless the 32-bit stuff completely dries up and you can't build stuff anymore, in which case I'll just shift over to releasing AArch64. But yeah, I think in current form is pretty good anyway. And besides, it would be in current form until the next release of Slackware anyway. So I'm not going to do anything before 15.0 is out.
Yeah.
Well, not release anything anyway. But that's my news. I haven't done much, and I've just been, just hacking on things here and there, and decided to remove Thunderbird and what was the other one? Sea Monkey finally from the tree because I just gave up building them. Just like, what's the point? Although I'll go back to building them for 64-bit because I think they do build there.
Yeah. That is, I can't find words. Are you aware of how long I've been sort of testing and manipulating your Slackware ARM to build 64-bit packages?
No, but I'm not really sure what you're doing now because I've looked at them and I don't think it's do anything.
Okay, let me explain. First, I need to ask you a question. Did I ever send you the worst hacked together bash script that manipulates your Slackit for building 64-bit packages? Did I ever send you that?
You did send me something, yeah.
Right. That's moved on slightly from the code you've got to what I'm using now. And what that does is it cajoles Slackit into building 64-bit AArch64 instead of 32-bit ARM. Now, if you look at that code, you will probably laugh and think he's cheating, because it's, like I say, it's the worst hack job I ever did. But it works after a fashion.
I'm not looking at the code, but I only looked at it yesterday when I actually updated Slackkit, as it is, Slackkit.
Slackkit.
Slack
Can
kit.
I
Not
just
Slack
can I
it.
just say
The
Slack
kit
it?
for Slackware. Slackkit.
Yeah.
Anyway, what? Yeah, so I don't have it in front of me, the code, but I was working on it the other day, and I have really not changed anything to make it work for 64-bit.
I was trying to shortcut. I mean, you've been developing Slackware ARM for donkeys. For how long? Nearly 20 years?
Almost. I think
Yeah.
8.
I was trying to shortcut that and save myself years of the experience that you have. And I was trying to force Slackit into building 64-bit packages as it would do 32-bit packages. I don't have the experience or knowledge to construct an operating system like you do. So I was trying to cheat and just run the Slackit to build the 64-bit packages. And it works after a fashion until it gets to a package that's been hard-coded for ARM only. And then, of course, it fails. And
which package is that one?
Well, unfortunately, Stuart, it's Bash. Yeah. That's the first one I came across, and I thought, oh my God, this is pretty fundamental for me.
No,
and
not.
Of course, this is the barrier.
Bash build script has nothing in there that's ARM specific.
Well, I'm going to have to look into it a little bit deeper then, because when I was building Bash, this is why I write everything down.
You literally write it down?
Yeah. I
do sometimes.
I have a pen and a pad next to me, and this is my kind of to-do list. Anything that comes up that I need to forget but remember, because I'm concentrating on something else, I write it down on my pad. And there's shopping lists and agendas and all kinds of things on this. As far as I can remember, it came up with lib64 not found, or lib64 directory doesn't exist. And I looked at the code, and it specified lib only, and there was no lib64 in there.
You must be looking at a really old source tree.
Yeah, maybe. But I've been meaning to mention this to you and discuss it with you to find out what the next stage in the plan is. But I don't think I need to do that now. If your mind's set on creating a 64-bit Slackware ARM tree, then yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, literally speechless over this news. I've been doing it for about 5 years. I think I started in like August, September, October 2015, or maybe a little bit before then. Really, as soon as the 64-bit OS started hitting the Raspberry Pi, I was looking at SUSE, I think, or sorry for any German listeners, it's SUSE. I think they pronounce it SUSE, but I call it SUSE. And I was looking at that, and I was thinking 64-bit operating systems are arriving, and Slackware just cannot miss out on this. Slackware is perfect. Well, yeah, Slackware is perfect for any application, but for 64-bit, whether it's going to be better or not, the hardware supports it. Therefore, it should happen. It should be available. And that was my mindset back in 2015. I've not worked on it constantly. I've done bits and bobs, and when I get some free time, I shall open up the old scripts, get the notes out, and carry on. But yeah, as far as I can recall, it was Bash was the first one to fail, and it was because there was no lib64 directory. You know how all that works. I mean, it's still a bit of a mystery to me, is some of it, but that's what I remember from what I did.
If you started that long ago, I don't know when all of the 64-bit changes I made, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, something like that. But there's not really much. I think I just took out lots of the C flags and abstracted those away into SlackKit, into the config file, because that makes it generally easier. It makes the build scripts more succinct. And then I added the anywhere that it was user lib, it became user lib with the lib64 suffix. But that suffix is set in the SlackKit config file. So I'm pretty certain that most of these build scripts are ready for 64-bit. I'm sure I'll find some that aren't, but it's been quite a long time now. My Slackware update tool actually tells me if the scripts aren't 64-bit ready. I haven't run it against everything, but as the system evolves, it picks up all of this stuff, and I go and make them 64-bit ready. So I think most of them will be already. If not, then I'll just fix them. It's not difficult. So once my boards arrive, I'll start looking at the boot process first to see how that works, and then start getting some packages built and going through my old notes to see how I went about doing that.
This is an ignorant question, but is the boot process any different for a 64-bit system than a 32-bit?
I think it can be, yeah, but I haven't looked into it too much yet. Right. So some of the systems, I believe, support encrypted boot with a system called SPS, and you can also use U-boot as well, but I haven't looked into that yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get support for the Rock Pro 64 board in whatever form that takes. That's the easiest route. Things like encrypted boot are not particularly interested in that. Some people might be, but I'm not. If I have to go down that route, then I'll learn that and figure it out. But I can't really see the purpose of it unless, if you were building something, was going to be an embedded appliance or something like that you were shipping out, and you wanted to add some security to it, as you should. Yeah, it makes sense. But if you're just essentially, installing something for your own consumption, like Slackware really is, then I don't really see the need for it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're taking this port and using it as an embedded system, then you might want to figure out how the encrypted boot works and then contribute it back upstream so I can have a look at it and include it if it makes sense as well. Somebody said to me the other day that they thought that Slackware was the best operating system for building embedded systems. And I hadn't really thought about it, despite having built, Miniroot and all of the other stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
But I never saw ARM as embedded, even though most people do, but I didn't because of where I started using it originally.
Okay.
And he said, so Slackware is the best one for embedded systems because you have a full operating system, you can pare it right down, and you can basically take full control of it and yet still use the packaging system, because the packaging system isn't strict. It doesn't mind if you remove many of the components of the packages. It just doesn't mind. It just tells you, oh, that used to be there, it's gone, I'll carry on. So it gives you that flexibility. And I thought, yeah, that's a good point, actually, because if you use another one, try using RPM or any of the others, they'll just complain and break because something's gone missing. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before.
Slackware is, for me, so versatile. You can basically, I have fudged it up more times than I will admit to, but it is so versatile in the way that you can change things, you can make it do what you want to do with little or no problems in most cases. And I think, I'm basically working on the Raspberry Pi, but I've also worked on the Hummingboard from Solid Run.
Oh, yeah.
I've also stolen your Orange Pi stuff and played with that quite a bit as well. But I've not really ventured into that because I see that as your thing. If you remember back when the orange pies were a topic of discussion, and I did this front page of a website, and you said, what are your plans with this? And I said, pretty much the same as I'm doing with the Raspberry Pi. And then you went ahead and did all your Orange Pi stuff. So I thought, I'm no need for me to bother now. I'm redundant. I'm redundant as far as the Orange Pi goes. I'm really grateful for you for doing that, because it saved a lot of time and helped me out a lot. And when I'm on the Orange Pi, I still use all the work you did. Haven't actually used it in almost a year now. But yeah, the Orange Pi is a fantastic piece of hardware. It just needs the software to support it. And I think Slackware, there is no better suited operating system than Slackware ARM for the Orange Pi, or any ARM hardware device or system. Slackware suits whatever you need to run it on.
It's true. I don't think you could say that about any other distribution.
Nope. That's true. And
I mean, you could obviously, but you'd be wrong. Obviously,
I always make a joke. Which people don't often get, and that's if you give me an ABI for a slice of toast, I'll install Slackware on it. And people don't laugh at that, because
I'm not laughing at that. I'm thinking that's a little bit extreme.
Yeah, they take me too seriously, but that's just my little joke.
Oh, right. You should let me know about these things ahead of time. So it's like, in the audience when they have these like applause signs that light up.
yeah, we need one of those. Cheer now. But yeah, Slackware AArch64, excellent. I have been wondering and testing and working and tinkering and all sorts of things. I've been doing it for so long, and it's a bit of an unknown. It's a lot of an unknown, actually, and very much a mystery to me how it all fits together, because I deal with certain packages and I know how they work and I know how they fit into the system. But when you start talking to me about Bash or CMonkey or Ruby or Elvis or anything like that, they're just individual packages, and I don't know where they fit in the system or
what
how
do you mean?
They run from whichever location they run from. This is all part and parcel of the operating system that you build, which I've never actually ventured into. But I mean, it's many times I've mentioned something, you've said, oh yeah, this is that, it's there, it's in this direction, you access it this way, and I'm thinking, all right, good when you know these kind of things. But there's all things that I need to know and need to learn. But if you're building AArch64 Slackware, then again, I'm going to be pretty much redundant. And that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong, that is not a complaint. I'm absolutely gobsmacked and somewhat overjoyed at what you've told me. Fantastic news. Really, really good news.
Yeah, but Phil, I have not got a Raspberry Pi, and I'm not going to get one.
Stuart, do you accept Christmas presents?
No, I don't like presents.
I remember last time I asked you if you were getting a Raspberry Pi, there was a few seconds of awkward silence before you answered, and forgive me, but that was so funny. That was really funny. Yeah, I get a lot of giggles out of that one. Yeah, the bootloader on a Raspberry Pi, coming back to the bootloader, it's a setting in a file called config.txt, and to put it in 64-bit mode, it's just a single line command. It's like ARM64 equals 1 or something like that. That's all you do to enable the SOC for 64-bit mode. Other devices obviously work differently, and not aware of how that would be, but I'm quite sure you're on top of all that. But as far as the Raspberry Pi goes, it is just build it as normal and add the extra command into config.txt file. So if you did have an AArch64 system which could be installed, it would easily install on a Raspberry Pi.
In the same way as the ARM v7 kernel has various different modules baked into the initRD, I'll probably do the same kind of setup for AArch64.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing is figure out what hardware support the Rock Pro 64 requires, and then build, then start there, and then anything else I can just add them in like I did. I already have the build script infrastructure is set up that way, and I quite like it that way. So I need to figure out what to do about the kernel as well to begin with. I might take the ARM v7 kernel config and just change it for 64-bit and see how that goes.
Well, I have the SARPy64 website, which I build 64-bit kernels on there. They're available to download. The source and the config and everything is available. So if you want to look at that for reference or information or whatever, you just download it. And there may be something in the config that helps you out. I don't know. That's
yeah, I'll have a look. Well, I need to try and keep the same structure as a 32-bit really, in terms of the way most things are modules and that kind of thing. So it shouldn't be too difficult to do. I'm not in a particular rush either, so I'm just gonna figure it out and then.
So you'll have it done before Christmas then, yeah?
I don't even think the boards will be arriving before Christmas. They're coming from China or Hong Kong.
Well, okay, then New Year's fine, Stuart.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. The initial bootstrap is always a bit fiddly, but once I've got the base packages, I can just stick them in my build machine and it'll start plowing through them and set it on 100 passes, and eventually you'll get quite a few packages out of it, and then I can figure out the problems and go again. That was the method last time because it involved the least amount of effort. It just required burning through more CPU time. That's the news, Phil. So I'll be starting doing that once the boards arrive, and I'm still making some changes to the build system as well, going through it and just adding in 64-bit support where I can. Well, actually, I should just say multi-arch support really. GCC 10 building right now. I've just updated the cross compiler. I was a little bit concerned that GCC 10 wouldn't build on Slackware 14.2, which is this CC host, but it did, and so now it's building natively. So yeah, it's good actually. It's going to be great. So I'll have the latest version of the toolchain to start building the 64-bit port with. So that's a really good start. And I guess what we can do, we can start talking about what the progress is on the podcast. With regards to the Raspberry Pi stuff, I did look at it actually, but from what I can see, it's still not lined up with the general ARM ecosystem. So I'm not particularly interested in trying to support it unless it becomes really obvious. In terms of the kernel, though, that makes sense certainly to have the Raspberry Pi support directly in it. Yeah. Sorry, the Raspberry Pi 4 support directly in it, though.
Yeah.
That just makes sense to do that. But in terms of actually describing how to install it, it's all yours. That's really your thing, Phil.
I can't see any problems because obviously I've done a lot of 64-bit building with the kernels and such. I can see this fitting in very nicely with the Raspberry Pi because for all the building and testing that I've done with the kernels and such, it's just run-of-the-mill stuff again. The only difference is the kernel config. And like I said, the extra command in the config text file makes it 64-bit. You boot the SOC in 64-bit, and therefore everything after that it expects the 64-bit instruction set and not the 32-bit. So I don't really see any complications or problems whatsoever.
It's going to be a pure 64-bit port as well. So you can make it so that it supports 32-bit and 64-bit. I just don't see the point in that.
No.
I understand that use case on x86 hardware where, for example, there's some third-party vendor where they've only provided binaries, and so you've got a 64-bit system and there is no 64-bit version of that software. But I don't think that's the case on ARM at all, and I don't think it ever has been, where you have binary-only packages. I mean, you had it with Flash Player, but Flash Player is already dead. Yeah. So I don't see that as a useful thing. So it's purely going to be a 64-bit port.
Yeah. Interesting.
Thinking to myself, it's probably a lot more work than I think it is. But then I also realised that I've already done this 4 times. So it's just that things like the kernel, I know are going to take ages to get working in the way I want it to be. That's always been that way. But at least the hardware is faster, though. And I'm really curious to see how fast the ARM hardware is, because I've never used a 64-bit ARM machine before. So, if it's so much faster than, say, the Orange Pi, it's going to make the development a heck of a lot easier, a lot faster, a lot more enjoyable, because, there's nothing worse than doing something and then waiting 2 days until it breaks. It's just not a great time, really. So it's better if it fails faster and you can fix it faster.
Quicker turnaround that way.
Exactly, yeah. That's what you want.
Yeah, I had that problem on the Raspberry Pi 1. Initially, it took about 12, 14 hours to build, and now it takes over a day. It's about 36, 38 hours, just because the size of the kernel has increased so much. There's so much more included in the kernel now than there was before. And that's exponential on the building time, So, yeah, I know what you mean. Quicker turnaround is preferable.
Yeah, I remember the old days. It was really, well, it was what it was.
Gruesome. Is it one of the Rock Pies that is 32-bit only?
I don't know.
32, or there's another device which is 32-bit, and I'm thinking, why is people still sticking 32-bit processors on ARM devices? But that's just me. My logical way of thinking in terms of advancement and productivity. It makes sense because of the cheapness and availability of ARM64 processors now. The devices that are being released, 99.9% of them are 64-bit processors on them.
Yeah, it's probably because there's always a long tail of adoption. So what that means is that when you've got, say, developers who are, they're taking the hardware and they're using the ARM SoC in some device, whether it's like a Nest, or it's some kind of smart device or something like that, or one of these little, miniature appliances. And so they have all of their tool chains set up for 32-bit. So for them to go and switch all of that to 64-bit and be happy with it, and having tested it, that's, that can be quite a movement and quite a transition for a business to do. So you end up with the old stuff around for much longer than you otherwise would. That's generally the reason why. But I'm in agreement. I mean, I'm not going to buy. That was also the major decision, because I thought to myself, there is simply no point in me buying or making any more support for 32-bit hardware. It just doesn't make sense. This is a hobby. So buying another machine that simply has a bit more RAM, it's not going to really make a difference, though. It's not going to make the builds any faster. It's not going to move the needle, even if I buy another 32-bit machine that's slightly faster than the Orange Pi. It's just not going to do that much. Whereas the 64-bit, there's more of a step change in that direction. So I was like, yeah, okay. Once I realized there's nothing left to sort of explore hardware-wise, it was worthwhile doing. It's quite funny, isn't it? So I said, no, I'm not going to do a 64-bit port. I don't need one.
I wasn't happy when you said that, to be honest.
Said what?
You said, why do I need to bother with an ARM64? I don't need an ARM64 port. Why would I want to build one? And I'm like, please, Stuart, please look into it. I think you were on holiday in Spain.
Yeah, do you know I was, and you kept going on about the 64-bit. Like, what's the architecture? Which architecture do I set it at? I'm like, come on, do the reading. I did, and that's when I learned the difference between ARM64 and AArch64. I just didn't know how to pronounce AArch64.
Yeah.
At the time,
but I remember that conversation where you said, well, why do I need to get involved in an ARM64 port? I don't need one, and I'm thinking. But it's the future, man. It's the way forward.
It wasn't my future at the time.
That was years ago. That was what, 2016 or so?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, time's flying.
Time flies.
Well, with the pandemic as well, it's literally like that movie Groundhog Day in some cases. It's like barely leave the house apart from to go to a takeaway or go and do a little bit of shopping or something like that, or go for a walk in a forest.
It's really great news. I mean, apart from anything else, apart from the development and the time and effort, you actually know what you're doing more than anybody else with Slackware ARM. And that is just a consoling thought that, Stuart's working on it, therefore it's going to work. Because, you don't release anything until it's perfect, and makes my life easier, I'll tell you.
I'm probably not going to release it at all until the entire thing is built. In fact, I'm not going to. I haven't done before. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So until every package that is buildable is built, I won't release it.
Absolutely, yeah, brilliant. I totally agree with that. Or else you're going to get people say, "Oh, this doesn't work." Well, no, it's not been built yet. Yeah, well, it should have been.
Yeah. There's too many moving parts to release something, and then because what happens is you'd release it and then realize that something else is broken, then you need to go and rebuild a whole bunch of other things in order to get it working. That happens so often that I wouldn't release it until I've probably rebuilt. I think the hard float 32-bit port was rebuilt. Maybe the entire package list was rebuilt almost 100 times before it was released. Just on a loop, it took a couple of months, and it just churned through every package over and over and over. So that's what I'll do, and then that way everything is all built. I mean, you don't need to do it that many times, but it's a good way of soak testing the system to make sure that things do actually. The tool chain is capable of recompiling itself over and over, and lots of packages, well, all the packages are capable of being compiled with that tool chain. Because often, that's a thought. When I did the ports before, I get to a point and everything was perfect. At least I thought it was, until I would go and upgrade something, and then certain things just fell apart. I was like, they're not even connected, but obviously they are. So I'd have to go and dig into it. So, and I remember being quite concerned because there was a really weird issue with zlib, libz, and it just didn't make sense to me. And then I propped it up and just got through it, and it just got fixed. But there's loads of weird nuances that you kind of get flushed out the more you rebuild everything against each other. And so that's the point that I'm satisfied that it works is when I'll push it out. Won't be until then, but there'll be quite a lot of changes, I suppose, happening in the build system. Well, actually not that many. I've already made a few of them, and there aren't really. There'll be a few, but there won't be massive amounts, I don't think, to get it working.
Right. So when you say you've changed things, is that in the current tree, or is that something you're working on behind closed doors?
All the changes are going in the Slackware ARM current tree, so there's going to be a unified tree. I'm just literally going to do a hard link between the source directory. So it'll have the SlackwareAArch64 current directory, and then it'll have all of the individual, it'll have its own Slackware directory and stuff like that. But some of the documentation, like the copyright and that kind of things, will be hard linked back to the other one. So I only need to maintain one source tree, and then obviously the binaries are separate. So that's how I'll actually set it up in a file system. So all of the changes I'm making will be going out in Slackware ARM current source tree.
Brilliant, fantastic. Because I'm wondering how much I will be able to download and have a look and peruse and tinker.
Oh, okay.
Not that I want to supervise you what you've got planned, but this is like Christmas come early. It really is. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of news. Yeah, Slackware AArch64, brilliant.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be nice to start working on some new hardware again. I realized I missed doing that. I actually missed having the new hardware and figuring out how to get it working and documenting that process. And I was like, I haven't done that for a long time, and I can't do that anymore. So let's find some new hardware so I can do it again.
How did you manage to acquire 3 devices from the manufacturer?
I went to the website, and they're really well priced. They're $79, I think, for the board or something like that. It's really good value. And then I just bought the accessories that I needed as well, like a decent 5-amp power supply and some other bits for it. And so I bought 2 of them because the way I'm going to do it is that I need to have a lead builder, and then I need to have a sort of safe house, because that's how I've always done it. So I have the lead builder where I'm just at the cutting edge, just pushing forwards. And then I have the stable machine that's a couple of weeks old, because invariably I'll break something, that's for sure. It always happens. Probably less so much these days, but the kernel will be something where I'll just break it. I absolutely know that. So I'll have a stable machine that I can go back to and just rebuild again, and then fix the leader machine. I need 2 machines minimum. So I bought 2 of them, and then I thought to myself, Well, actually, I did this the other way around. I emailed the Pine 64 people and said, oh, it's a bit cheeky. Will you do that? And I didn't think that they would actually send me one. So then I bought two of them. So, but then they said that they would send one. So I was like, that's really cool, because then it means I can set up a distributed build system as well. Like I can use distcc, well, natively really, because one of the issues that I have with the 32-bit is that I don't have an LLVM, a cross compiler. And so that means that packages like Rust and Firefox take absolutely ages to build.
Yeah.
So I did try and build LLVM, the latest version, on my 64-bit, my Slackware x86 64-bit distcc host, but it's too old. You can't build the latest LLVM on Slackware 14.2 without doing a significant amount of work that's just not worth it. Yeah. So I thought to myself, if these machines are as fast as Phil tells me they are, that means I can have a number of AArch64 machines running the latest Slackware AArch64 distribution, and I can just upgrade them. So, for example, it means that I don't ever have to build a cross-compiler toolchain. I don't, again. So I just upgrade the 64-bit machines, and then they will automatically have the latest version of the toolchain. So that was my plan. As to whether I actually just figure out how to get distcc with two separate 32-bit and 64-bit toolchains, I might do that anyway, because it will speed it up even more, which would be quite good. Once I get the machines, I'll figure out how I can build a 64-bit cross-compiler as well, and have distcc pick the right one depending on which the client is. I don't know how to do that. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I can do something. It's not that difficult. Even if it just means changing a port of distcc and, changing a config file, it's probably not particularly complicated, I don't think.
Yeah, I found some information on the Raspberry Pi. It was a blog post, and I forget the name, Robert. The guy was called Robert. And it was a few lines of code. And I realized from these 3 lines of code that it's going to be far easier to build my own cross-compiler than download a toolchain and use that. I mean, you will have heard of Linaro.
Yeah.
And I was looking into that, and it just wasn't going to work. It was so far from perfect that it wasn't worth bothering with. And I thought to myself, I can have a go at building my own cross-compiler, and we'll just see how successful it is. It has to be one of the easiest things I've ever done once I understood what I was trying to achieve, because I really didn't have a clue when I started. Mm-hmm. I didn't know about tool chains, and glibc has to be built according to the version of GCC and all that. It was like reading a mystery novel, because I didn't really know where it was going. But trial and error, I managed it quite easily, in fact. And I have a script which will run on any version of Slackware ARM on any device. So if you want that, you're quite welcome to it.
Yeah, so you're building a tool chain on 32-bit, weren't you, to build for 64?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So in the same way as I already have a tool chain for distcc, which is on the FTP side, I just need to update that a little bit so that it can also build a tool chain for the AArch64 target. So it would still run on x86 as the host machine, but the target of the compiler, it would output for AArch64. So I would actually have 2 separate compilers. I'd have one tool chain for 32 and another one for AArch64. So I'd have 2 separate binary tool chains on my x86 64 machine, and then I just need to tell distcc which one to use depending on which client is connecting. So I'll probably do that at the TCP port level. So I'll just have the 32-bit to connect to the default port, and perhaps AArch64 would connect to another port that will allow me to connect or direct distcc to a particular tool chain based on
right.
TCP. So I just haven't done it. I'm sure it's pretty easy, even if I just hack it. So I'll probably do that. And because I don't think that would be much work, but I still don't have an LLVM toolchain, because I don't want to go and upgrade my x86 64 machine until 15.0 is out, because otherwise I'll have to reinstall it again.
Yeah.
But hopefully that should be coming out. I don't know when, but KDE is due to be upgraded very, very soon. And GCC 10 has just gone into the tree as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and PAM's already in, so it's getting closer. Don't have any dates, but it's getting closer. Once I've got the hardware, we can have a chat and we can have an update.
Yeah, great.
Well, it's good to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, Stuart.
All right, cheers, man. See you later.
Catch you later.